We're Kiki and Manu. And
We're traveling around the world.
follow us. On this route through northern France, two places stand out above the rest. The first is Honfleur, a port with houses over 300 years old built at the water's edge and a light that changes the landscape every minute. The second is Saint-Malo, a walled city where the tides can exceed 12 meters and completely transform the coastline in a matter of hours. Stay and discover why they're among the most photographed places in Europe.
We're between Etré, which is where we're coming from, Étretat.
Autreta,
We're now heading over to Honfleur.
Honfleur,
Well, now we'll put a map up there so you can see where we're going.
Honfleur, which will be pronounced in every way.
And suddenly, the GPS was leading us into the water. I mean, like, where are we going? And well, it's not that we're going into the water, but that we have to cross a river, and we have to do it on a boat that we've stopped to see. And it's free. After 10 minutes of waiting, we start the crossing on this great adventure across the river. The river, which is the Seine River no less, is what we're crossing in the little boat.
We're in Honfleur, who knows how you pronounce it, and this place is extremely important. Why? Because here the Seine flows out, the same river that passes through Paris. This is where the fresh water of the Seine mixes with the salt water of the Atlantic. And what's more, we're in the English Channel. Right across, what we see here is one of the most important ports in France, Le Havre, and from here they set sail. In the 16th and 17th centuries, many ships, many French sailors bound for America and Canada. We parked on this avenue that connects the beach and the city, and we reached the center on foot in about 10 minutes. An old lighthouse, inland, reveals to us that the coastline here has changed over the centuries. We move between the first houses, with the estuary still very present and some boats appearing, but without yet reaching the old port, which is the main attraction. Narrow streets, shops close to local life, heading to the heart of this picturesque commune, as they're called in France. We start the route through the city center, and we start at the Church of Sainte-Catherine. This church, right in the center of the town of Honfleur, is made entirely of wood and is separate from the rest of the church building. It was built this way on purpose, just in case. In the event of a storm, the storm knocked down the main tower, so they wouldn't have to rebuild the entire church. Honestly, after a night of heavy rain, typical for January in Normandy, the day has dawned beautiful and blue. And as always, the blue sky gives everything a really lovely tone. There we see the tower, which is separate from the rest of the church. A small vegetable market and a very pretty town. Some spectacular houses we're seeing here in Normandy. Let's see if we can find some eggs, because I don't know what's going on in France with the eggs. Here, just like in Troyes, wow, you see the half-timbered houses, typical of France, of some French cities, made with wooden beams that warp over time and were basically built to be more economical. What they did was swap stone for wood during times of crisis when wood was cheap, but stone was expensive and hard to come by. Today, they're iconic and beautiful to see, but back then, well, in fact, they almost tore them down because they were a sign of poverty. What's strange is how they've survived so long, with all the foundations from the ground up being made of wood. It's incredible. Especially that wood with a construction method in places as damp as Normandy, where it doesn't stop raining in winter. In fact, you can see it because almost all the streets are full of mold and grass, and yet they still used wood. And here it is, centuries later. Known as the Vieux Bassin, it's the most iconic port in the city. These tall, narrow houses from the 16th to the 18th centuries stand literally right next to the water, reflecting like a perfect mirror. Here, the light changes constantly and transforms the same landscape every few minutes, which might explain the magic of this place. Well, we're in the old port of Honfleur. One of the places, perhaps the best-known spot in the area for its colorful houses, some of them warped by the centuries they've spent on wooden pillars. And for those of us who like painting a bit, or have, like in my case, a mother who's painted for ages, Monet, the famous Impressionist painter, was inspired from many of his paintings by these boats and these houses. Almost all of his paintings include these images. From here, from this port, many well-known French explorers set sail. Perhaps the most famous of them all? I didn't know him, but I took the liberty of looking up who he was. Samuel de Champlain, who was the founder in 1608 of the city of Quebec in Canada. The tides here change a lot. When the tide goes out, the port looks like a completely different place. In fact, although we haven't seen it because we just arrived, they say when the tide is fully out, inside the port, there's no water left. It must be impressive to see, and that's even though right now, as we can see, it's quite low. We've come to this street in the very center of the city because it's the street that appears in some of Monet's paintings. And upon arriving, we found that it's true that it's a street with many houses, with timber framing, very old, and a very photogenic street. I understand that centuries ago it was also a very beautiful street to paint. Curious because they're ancient and it would seem like they were abandoned. I'm sure that inside they're true palaces because, in fact, look at what we just happened to find. I'm seeing people, the occasional person looking out the window and so on. They're houses that are fully inhabited. We leave Honfleur behind and continue traveling along the coast of the English Channel. Here, between Normandy and Brittany, the cliffs dominate the landscape. Rock walls that drop into the sea and lighthouses that watch over one of Europe's busiest maritime routes. The wind, the salt spray, and miles of wild coastline marking the way. We continue heading towards Saint-Malo. Neither French nor Breton, Malouin. That is the motto of Saint-Malo. Saint-Malo, which belongs to French Brittany, was independent for 4 years in the 17th century. It's in their blood. We're going inside the walls, the old part, which was almost 80% destroyed in the Second World War, but which was faithfully rebuilt exactly as it was. Last night, we already walked along its walls, and it is an exceptionally beautiful place, open to the Atlantic. The entire city is surrounded by walkable walls that were built to prevent attacks and smuggling. Let's go! The streets inside are narrow, mainly to shelter them from the wind. Let's go up to the walls. The view from the top is super beautiful. Look at the wear on these steps. They have a great story to tell. Well, we just passed 6 soldiers, rifles in hand, patrolling and walking around the wall. And as we mentioned in a previous video, remember that in France, we are at the maximum alert level for attacks. So it's not that you see them every 2 seconds, but it's true that unlike other countries we've visited, Spain, where we're from, and Italy, where we've traveled all through the north, it's very common to see police and military, especially in very touristy places. We are next to one of the great prides of Saint-Malo, the privateer René Duguay-Trouin. And the city was known for having many privateers. And did you know that the difference between a privateer and a pirate is that the privateer is one of the good guys? That is to say, they fulfilled the role of, indeed, attacking smugglers and catching the bad guys. It's just that they did it under the laws of the kings, meaning they did it with authorization, unlike the pirates, who acted like vandals. The walls are about 2 kilometers long. During World War II, the Germans used them as a defensive point. They have been reinforced and modified for 700 years, and they began to be built in the 12th century. They are made of Breton granite to survive cannon fire, not swords, cannon fire. Doesn't it catch your eye? What's inside the walls? What's underneath? Well, on the inside, the walls are wide and walkable. They weren't just walls, they were military corridors that allowed for moving soldiers and cannons quickly. The ground is uneven to drain the rainwater. There are hidden steps that connected to the city, and some areas were gunpowder storehouses. Others served as permanent lookout posts. The walls are solid, not hollow. They're pure strength. And that's because they used to be used for patrolling. We're starting to see the first beaches. This one in particular is between walls, and we can see it now because the tide is low. The funny thing is that during high tide, it completely disappears. And the same thing happens here as in Mont Saint-Michel, which is barely 30 kilometers from here. And the tides are very strong, with up to 10 meters of difference between high tide and low tide. In fact, we're going to start seeing all the little islands, the islets around the island. They can be reached by walking at low tide. Who would have thought on a day like today, so calm and peaceful? But this is a very windy area. When the sea gets furious, it goes over the walls. The buildings we see on the front line are tall, many of them to protect from the wind and even the sea on stormy days. That's why the part facing the sea is very plain. And yet, where they're decorated and are really beautiful and elegant is on the back parts of the building, not the one right by the sea. And here are Grand Bay and Petite Bay. As you can see, Petite Bay is fully fortified. It has a 17th century military fort, and the first one is wilder. And although both are fully accessible at low tide, we're seeing that on the second one, there are no people. On the first, there are. Let's take advantage of the walkway and hop over. Look how beautiful this natural pool is, how they've made use of it there. Well, they've made a pool using the sea with its diving board and everything.
Gorgeous, right?
Looks great. And the the sea is turquoise blue, super pretty. This in summer or on sunny days must be spectacular because it already is on a winter day with little sun. In fact, in this part here, last night when we were walking, we noticed that there were very few lights on and many shutters down. And that's because almost the entire interior, the walled city of Saint-Malo, is owned by people with second homes or summer houses. So this is when it really comes to life, and surely a lot of life in the summer. Right now, it's very quiet. I think in that shot that Manolo is taking right now, you can clearly see the strength of the tides. Because if the tide at low tide makes it so you can walk towards the islets directly on foot without any problem. And yet, we know that at high tide, at high water, the water reaches all the way up here. And that even when the sea is rough and there's a storm, it goes over the walls. There, you realize the strength of the tides in this area, Brittany.
Let's take full advantage of the low tide right now and carefully make our way across the wide sandy beach so we can reach the mount.
This is the first one. It's Grand Bay, and the other is Petit Bay. We don't know who B is, but one is big and the other is small.
We're gonna cross through here, where last night there would have been a couple of meters of water, and now it's walkable.
Yes, incredible, walking on the seabed.
Indeed. Which, in 4 or 5 hours, will be flooded with water again.
And with the massive walls in the background? At night, there's some tremendous downpours, but during the day, it holds off. You can even see through some corners. The blue sky.
Yeah, at least it's not windy either, which is usually a super windy area. And it's a great day to enjoy because there's no wind at all, huh?
And even though you see me so bundled up, I get cold easily. But Manu is wearing a sweatshirt, basically.
It's very nice. It's not.
It must be about 9 degrees. Having come from -7, we're in heaven. Well, here we arrive at a very curious corner of the island of Grand Bay, the tomb of François-René de Chateaubriand, writer, politician, and father of French Romanticism, who was born here in Saint-Malo in 1768. A tireless traveler and deeply nostalgic for the sea, he wanted to be buried here, alone and facing the Atlantic. His grave has no name, just a cross. It's only visited at low tide, like now, and it's just as he wanted. He chose this place to listen to the sea eternally. He said the ocean was his true homeland. I'd like that too, you know? I don't know if you caught it from what I said at the start. Bretons consider themselves Bretons, not even French. I guess that's faded over time, but a Breton is a Breton. That said, we're on the island of Grand Bay, and that one there, Petit Bay. Baie in Old Breton means island or rocky crag. Petit Bay, which, yes, you can go to, but since it's a fully fortified island and the fort is completely closed, nobody goes because what for? Well, it's also true there's a small stretch of water where you'd get wet, but as I said, you can't see anything anyway. It's full of seaweed here and there, and there's a strong smell of the sea. Proof of the sea's power and the force with which it hits the walls. These large timbers here, their purpose is exactly that, to stop the sea's force before it beats against the wall itself. Which, seeing how it is between the rain and the humidity? Wow. We're in Chateaubriand Square. And it's definitely the place to go for drinks or dinner when you come to Saint-Malo. We leave the square and head into the city's interior. Narrow streets, stone everywhere, and that seafaring vibe felt in every corner. And from the air, Saint-Malo shows itself as it is, a walled city completely surrounded by the sea. On this trip, we've traveled through Normandy and Brittany, two very different areas, but joined by a wild coast, history, and ever-changing landscapes. If you haven't seen the rest of the route, all the videos are on the channel with more stops, curiosities, and places that don't usually appear in guides. And before we go, a quick fact. Most of you watching these videos aren't subscribed, and subscribing is what allows us to keep putting out full routes. Little-known places and all the real information you see here. It's free, it costs you nothing, and it helps you discover places like this without wasting time or money. If you got something out of this video, subscribe now, because what's coming next on the route is even better. See you at the next destination.